We're not in this book?
Oh,
Are we in
I-
this book?
No, I'm sure we're not.
Oh, we're
Yeah, we
not.
are.
But I
We're
don't
not in
know.
this book?
There must be something on the table.
Good evening.
This thing.
This is a budget work session. This is number 4. It is a town council, school committee joint work session. And the time is 7:10. The date is March 14th. And if we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, we have on the agenda discussion as far as the school fund transfer, and then we will also take other matters of interest and concern. And those other matters of interest and concern, if we can keep them related to, this is a budget work session. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kristen Stringfellow. Thank you.
I've asked the chairman to permission to deviate from tonight's agenda just a bit. I know that we are supposed to be speaking about budget tonight, but more important than the budget, Mr. Rashat and I have been at Broad Rock Middle School most of the day today, and as our primary concern is the district, student safety in the district, I wanted to report out that we had an issue today, and I'm not sure if everyone knows the chronology of the concern at Broad Rock Middle School, so if you would permit me, I'd like to start at the beginning. We've been there all day. I don't have formal notes with me this evening. I did take 5 minutes in order to jot some things down so I could keep the chronology in my head. But staff had noticed a gas-like odor and a burning smell. Our protocol indicates that whenever a gas-like smell is observed, the fire department is notified and the building may be evacuated. This started occurring several months ago. John and I met with Fire Chief Perry in early January, and we had exhausted all of our maintenance resources within district to resolve this odor concern. So we contacted an outside consultant, an HVAC engineer, R.L. Harridge and Associates. That firm came in and did an independent assessment of the building and the equipment, and they advised us to select an independent contractor to come in and check out all of our HVAC equipment on the roof and in the boiler room, and they found that our ventilation system was not working at maximum efficiency. So we did lots and lots of work, and you may have noticed that we called off school one day because they needed to turn the boiler on and off, which would have left students and staff without heat. So it was important that we get this work done, and I called off school. Mostly during the week of February vacation, we changed approximately 40 belts on the units. We repaired some pulleys. All in all, took apart the boiler and got the ventilation system operating at optimal efficiency. And that solved the issue of the burning smell. And at this point, the ventilation system is hyper working. It is working at, folks poke fun at my peak efficiency, but it is literally really humming and blowing notices off of the walls. And the gymnasium, the physical education teachers made reference to the fact that they're getting hoarse because they're having to talk over it for the first time in several years. Most of the staff have indicated to us that they don't remember it working like this well in the past. During that time, I feel like John has devoted his life to Broad Rock Middle School, and I've been there more often than I think I've seen my children lately. But it's been important for us to be there. We met with the state fire marshal. We met with the deputy state fire marshal. I can't say enough about our local fire chief. Chief Perry has been there every single time and has worked with us tirelessly, as have the staff in the building, and certainly Sheila Sullivan and Jen Ank. The state fire marshal, the local fire marshal reviewed all the work that was completed and all the work in progress, and the state fire marshal was satisfied with the work that we had done and turned it over to Chief Perry. In addition to all that work, we called the Department of Health for advice to ask them, are we doing everything that we possibly can? Is there anything else that you can think of? We brought in Jerry Bliss, who is an industrial hygienist who does air quality testing. The trust recommended Jerry Bliss. And in his opinion, now that the ventilation system was at peak efficiency, we were still smelling an odor because we were drawing in every odor in the area. So if there was someone cooking food, it was coming into the classrooms, they were drawing it in. Something that was happening out in the yard, we were drawing in the odor. So what Jerry Bliss suggested to us is to draw the exhaust farther away from the air intake valves to raise the stacks on the roof with a 6-foot extension. That was completed immediately. The Department of Health was very satisfied with our work. The industrial hygienist satisfied with our work. We asked him to return today, now that the work is all complete in our opinion, to do final air quality testing. And then we also have a plan to change again every air filter in the building. They had just been changed, but we thought with all the work that we had done, let's be super proactive and change them all out again. So just when we thought it was over and that all of our issues were resolved, late last week, odors were again reported. Fire officials came in, Jerry Bliss came in, they assured us and the staff and the parents that the building was safe. They had monitored it for gas and carbon monoxide, and none of those features were coming up on any of the detector equipment. It's also important to note that on 2 occasions, National Grid came in to detect for leaks, detected no leaks, detected no carbon monoxide. Today, during the final air quality test, we wanted to ensure that all gas jets to the science labs were permanently off. And so the maintenance staff from our community went down into the boiler room, and our plumber detected an odor. And so he sprayed, and I'm going to say this technical term, snoop, on the pipes connected to all of the boilers, just to ensure that there were no little bubbles. He detected very small bubbles on the very back of the boiler, which would indicate that there was a small leakage of something. Our protocol is evacuate the building. We immediately evacuated the building. Fire personnel came in, shut off the gas. Building was deemed safe by the fire personnel. Students and staff return. NextGen, which is the independent contractor, was called to make the repair. Initially, now we were there. We saw the bubble. NextGen comes in, can't find the bubble. We're spraying it, snooping it. They're looking at us like, really? Was there a bubble? Literally, the bubble was the size of a pin. I saw it, John saw it, the fire chief saw it, a pin that would disappear, would go away, and then would resurface. Pin, prick, bubble. That's important to know. So initially, they couldn't find the pinpoint hole when they tried to detect it. So the air quality specialist pointed to the part where we saw, right on the, what is it called? The
gas pipe coming in.
Yes,
Feed pipe coming
the
in.
feeder pipe. The air quality specialist and the fire chief both indicated to John and I that although the odor was detected and technically there was leakage, it was much, much too small, too minuscule, and intermittent to be of a health hazard, which practically brought me to tears because that was our primary concern. The safety of our children is most important to us. We would never put our children or staff in harm's way. We have been given clearance to open the building tomorrow. Out of an abundance of caution, we will continue to have a fireman stationed at Broad Rock with the metering device on hand. Sheila has one also. She will not leave her station without it. The air quality expert initial findings are all clear, show no signs of gas, no carbon monoxide. He's sent out the more significant tests to be analyzed in the lab, and we expect results in 7 to 10 days. We are hopeful that this will bring closure to the odor problem. Yet we will continue to be hypervigilant in our monitoring. But I know that people are concerned. I know that families would like an update. I would like an update if I were a mom of a child in the building, although I think we all feel that all of them are our children. And so I thank you for giving me the opportunity to sort of give you an update and to give the public an update.
Do we have any questions here at the table? Or any school committee member have a question? Yep, Jim?
Yeah, where the bubble was, what's the metal?
It's a regular iron gas pipe, the feed pipe that goes into the back of the boiler and delivers the gas to the boiler.
I certainly know with home inspections and business inspections, sometimes a gauge really fools you, what's supposed to be there and what's not. I mean, I've seen pinholes develop in certain thicknesses of copper and other metals, but believe me, I'm not an expert in that world. But if you're satisfied with air quality, is everything going to be running at Mach 10 though, where the noise level, what do you have to do? Will you be able to run it at a normal speed?
We are working at the correct ventilation system. It's a difference because it was not that blowy. I know that's not a technical term, but it's all I've got right now. It was not that blowy previously. So noise control levels have not been reported to be a problem.
There's very adequate velocity for the air exchange in the building, drawing it in from the outside, bringing the makeup air into the building, and we're getting very good delivery of heat into the building to the point where we've had to cut back some of the thermostats because we are getting full velocity and full delivery of heat into the rooms.
That's right. That was the technical term for blowy.
And the last question, who are the folks that installed it? Are these the same people looking at it now? But when it was built in 2000, we have the same company still in business?
No, Harridge and Associates designed the system, did not do the installation, so they had nothing to do with the installation. And we chose Mr. Harridge to come in because he was familiar with the design and knew what to look for. He's the one who recommended the independent group NextGen to come in and work on it. So they were totally unassociated with the initial installation.
Industrial Boiler put our boiler in.
Any further questions here at the table? We want to thank you for giving us the update, and I'm sure all the people watching, are very, very happy that you did that also. So thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to.
What I'm going to do is just turn down the lights a little so that that's picked up on the screen a little better. Thank you, Andy.
I'm ready. Let me just shift gears. Okay. Where is it, John?
You're gonna go for this drive.
Okay, I'll just do it with this one. So, the way we framed this discussion with the school committee is the way we're framing it with the town council. We started looking at it with, sorry, my computer's having a heart attack. We started looking at it under big idea concepts when we held our initial budget conversations. We talked about where were we in the past with our budget, how are we currently organized to support and accelerate learning opportunities for students, where are we today, under what conditions would allow school structures and programs to remain the same or grow, and what opportunities, program efficiencies are available to reallocate resources. And so it gives you just a preview of 2010-11 budget. We had several phases. It seems so long ago, yet it seems just like yesterday, where before we even proposed a budget to the school committee, we had a cut of $498,000. Superintendent's budget was $59 million, and then the school committee had to make $1.2 million worth of cuts in order to present a budget to the town council of in excess of $58 million. Next. And this is how we got to the 1.2 million. I thought I'd include that slide for that town council and the public to refer to if needed, but I don't anticipate going through them. As you can see, we had significant reductions to staff and programs, and really tried to not lose entire areas, lose entire groupings, but do our best to equalize some of the cuts so that there was equity among them. Next. And then we had that surprise governor's supplemental budget, which I hope to never see again, where we had to mid-year then freeze our P accounts, freeze all non-contractual substitute teachers, freeze professional development that was not already initiated or paid for, and we had further reductions in special education tuitions based on the time that we had left in the school year and how much we could think of reducing in that category. Next. And then we did have budget neutral conversations, because even though more money is not coming into the school district, our needs are changing, and we have to sometimes reallocate in areas. And so if you'll recall, we eliminated consultant services for custodial supervision, and we created a custodial supervisor and assistant maintenance director, who I might add was exceptionally helpful today, Mr. DeRosa. We reorganized the technology department around student need and district and state requirements, and we restructured roles in special education and in finance. Then we had the next budget year, and this budget season, superintendent's budget was as presented, 59 million, school committee budget 58 million, school committee budget was updated. Next. And it necessitated $644,000 worth of cuts, which were very difficult to find because we had already cut so much the year previous. And you'll notice that they spanned the gamut of our services, trying always to protect our student core and our programs around the core. Next. We also had budget neutral conversations at the school committee level, talking about restructuring the high school offerings, eliminating the 9th grade B-level classes, the addition of social studies and science honors classes in grade 9, and adding supports for youngsters who were formerly in B-level. We restructured the leadership team to reduce one assistant principal at the high school, and I can't make this stop. And replace it with a reading coordinator. I'm sorry, we dropped one assistant principal at the high school and replaced with an RTI specialist because our state and national program was warranting support in RTI. And we restructured the reading program to reduce one reading teacher in retirement and replace with a reading coordinator who could also evaluate staff. We restructured Broad Rock School to reduce staffing itinerant time, and we replaced it with guidance services, and we added back a grade 6 full-time science and social studies complement. And now we walk into this year. And so just as a review of and an update of where we were when we last spoke to you, we still have current collective bargaining terms, NEASK wage freeze for 3 years, copay, steps 1 through 3 at 15%, steps 4 through 6 at 17%, steps 7 through 8 at 18%, steps 9 and 10 at 20%, and salary increases at steps only. SKESP wage freeze for 3 years, copay at 15%, Council 94 wage freeze for 3 years, copay at 15%. $250,000 turnover allowance was formerly $300,000 because with the reform and changes to the pension system, although there are only 5% of our teachers eligible to retire, they may not elect to in these circumstances. Materials allowances, which we call P accounts, were increased by 3% but reduced by enrollment. Insurance and utilities increased by 5%. Healthcare and dental insurance, we're using the working rate at an increase of 0%. And we made adjustments for outside tuitions by 3%, which includes special education tuitions, Charahoe Vocational Center, and charter schools. And our last discussion at this table was revolving around the capital plan. Next. With our revenue assumptions, the state aid projections, we are in the third year of the funding formula. We have had yet another reduction in the funding formula this year in approximately the amount of $320,000. Student enrollment decline will continue to impact funding formulas. The Jobs Fund is estimated to be included, and the group home aid as well in the governor's budget. Local revenues, which we'll speak about momentarily, we feel as if 0.3% will balance our operating budget. Utilization of an estimated 25% of the fund balance will be applied as revenue. And as you know, our Medicaid reimbursement continues to drop. 2 years ago, we were anticipating and received $800,000, and now we're projecting about $600,000. Next. So this is our budget process to date. My superintendent's budget was what the school committee adopted, $58,810,596. And the school committee updated budget that we are speaking to you about this evening is in the amount of $58,250,400. How did we get there between the school committee budget and the updated budget conversation tonight? We had reduced the proposed expense budget by about $560,000. And this happens over time. Mr. Alfred talks about the budget being a process. Well, the process for us starts so many months ago that as we have more history in this current budget and we trend in certain directions, we're able to give you more reasonable data, more reliable data. We made our projections in the fall. There have been positive changes since that time. We were also able to identify about $40,000 in increased revenue from tuition from an ITA student. And these changes that I'm going to speak to you about on the next slide will reduce the requested increase to the property tax transfer from 1.6%, which we thought we would be coming here asking you for today, to 0.3%. Next. This chart indicates where we were able to get positive trending. In salaries, $68,000 because of positive trending in ESY and overtime. $200,000 in health insurance experience and credits. $34,000 in dental insurance now that we're self-insured. $20,000 in workman's comp from a trust board-approved dividend for 2013. Purchase services, $47,000. Charter tuitions and transportations are trending positively, $39,000. Trending in utilities, $42,000, and we have worked with the town manager and the finance director to talk about doing some pre-purchase of the track and the high school security updates moved from this budget, from the budget season that we're in right now. We had done a pre-purchase last year when we were trending well in terms of our current budget. We did that in technology so that it wouldn't impact the property tax transfer as much. And so this is my concluded slide. We received from the town 2009 and 10, 0% increase, 2010-11, 0% increase, last year's 0.6, and what we're here to request from you this evening is a 0.3. I think that's my last slide, isn't it? That concludes my presentation. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions here at the table? Jim?
Yeah, Kristen, the group home aid, is that in the governor's budget, or is it in part of the budget subject to his various tax request increases? I mean, is it in there? Is the language in there?
It's in the RIDE budget.
It's in the RIDE budget that goes through the Board of Regents to the governor, and it was included in there.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions here at the table? I just want to make note that it's also in the budget message on page 28, transfer to the school fund, so I'm just looking through. Is the jobs, is that 430,000?
The jobs fund.
427,000.
427,000.
420,000 for the jobs fund, 375 for the group home aid.
And the Independent Transition Academy, do we have 2 students from out of district coming in, or is it just 1?
We have, I think, 3.5 students coming in from other districts, but they are currently seniors and scheduled to graduate or rotate out. And so the tuition that we identified for next year was a non-senior student with the district indicating they would be returning.
And has there been any discussion with surrounding districts? I know that, when I was involved in working in the educational field, that there was discussion with, instead of paying dollars for students to attend, but maybe there would be an exchange of sending personnel. I mean, I didn't know if that was a discussion that has been had or brought forth from any other school district.
To my knowledge, I'm not aware of a discussion like that, but I'm happy to bring that up to Dr. Sicardo so that she can think that through.
No, I don't know of any discussion.
Jim?
Excuse me, is Steve going to maybe comment on some of the reductions, or do we just move forward with the questions? How do you want to handle this?
Steve, did you want to comment on any of the reductions?
I think that Kristen has gone through a summary of the reductions. In the manager's budget, pages started on page 28 and 29 to 31. I went through the school department budget. We talked about how much the school committee had budget would have required. We talked about the revenue statement. We, in our review, agreed with the revenues, other than we asked for the adjustment on the outside tuition, which you just talked about, which was the $39,500. And we also dealt with the property tax transfer based on the reductions that were made or I should say revisions that are made. I want to make one thing clear. There's $560,000 in adjustments to what the school committee's originally proposed budget was. $110,000 of that is not reductions, but money that will be expended in the 11-12 year or current year. So there's really $450,000 in actual adjustments. When we look at the adjustments, and those adjustments are shown on page 31, many of these adjustments are based on an annual basis. What we do is have a review of the object code detail from the school budget, and we look at actual expenses through January 31st of each year, as well as overall expenses by object code for the prior 2 fiscal years. We then compare that to what's being spent in the current year for the same period of time, and then we look at what's being proposed for the following year. That's where many of the adjustments were made outside of the $110,000 that I previously referenced. Things like the overtime, the budget that was being proposed was significantly higher than what the spending trends had been over the last several years, and that runs through each of those accounts. The benefits, the health care, as the council's aware, we're in a cost-plus program at this point. We have had good experience both on the municipal program and on the school program, and we are able to maintain the transfer to the school fund in the same amount as what it was in the current year. Same thing with dental. That's on a cost-plus basis now, and we were seeing less expenditures than had been anticipated. And the comp, was based on the insurance trust agreeing that there would be dividends again paid this year. The accounts and the purchase services really are based on trending to actual expenses over the prior 2 years. I'm not going to go into detail. If there's any specific questions, we can address those. I think the only account that I would make reference to is the other services. The other services is a reduction of $20,000. That means that this original item was a $68,000 line item. $48,000 of that was in salaries associated with the program for family intervention and engagement. And that program had been run in the past as a third-party vendor providing services to the school department. That was going to be changed in the 2012-2013 year, but a portion of that, I think it's going to continue to be run third-party vendor because it's still in that purchase services account, but a portion of that $68,000 was monies that could come out of the federal Title I funds. So there was no reason for that to be budgeted in the general school fund if Title I funds were available. So that $20,000 was reduced there. We talked about the tuition from the charter schools. The estimate was a little bit high for what we had seen as the actual experience as far as number of students in the charter schools, and the agreements were made on that. Electricity, that's an account similar to what we saw in the municipal accounts where under the new purchase agreement for the supply of electricity, we're expecting that the schools will see a substantial reduction, as much as 25% reduction on the supply component of the electricity that they purchase. So they'll have 3/4 of the year at a reduced fee. On the town side, you know, we're looking at some substantial savings. We think the schools will experience similar savings. Even with the $30,000 reduction, we think that that account still has some flexibility in it. I wanted to talk just for a minute and address the revenue statement. The revenue statement is one that, as I mentioned, we agreed on the revenue statement to go with what the schools were recommending. I am concerned and am cautious as to where the state budget will go as far as education aid is concerned. The governor's budget did provide for, and my numbers that I've gotten from the state, we're showing that South Kingstown was going to lose $331,000 as the, for the second of the 10-year reduction that they're going to see, because based on the formula, we allegedly are overfunded. The governor's budget also suggests that the state funds are going to replace where the federal jobs funds have been in the prior year. So with that, the group home dollars were going to stay the same. So we've budgeted at the $8.5 million, but one of the things I pointed out in the budget message is that the governor's budget is proposing a $69.7 million increase in education-related funding. So I think it's up about 4.7%. And a portion of those dollars were to be paid for through the implementation of an additional 2% increase on the meals tax. Meals tax was going to be worth about, I think it was about $39,500,000 of that $69 million. So they were going to come up with $30 million. If they do not come up with the meals tax and the General Assembly is going to provide the funding levels that have been suggested by the governor, they're going to have to come up with alternative funding sources, or they're going to have to look at expenditure reductions. One of the things that the governor proposed this year that has no impact on South Kingstown schools is an $11 million program that escalates the payments to be made to those school districts that allegedly were underfunded based on the new education aid formula. So whether that stays or it doesn't stay has no impact on South Kingstown. What will have a difference is if in fact, there's less dollars that are made available either through the, for the replacement on the federal jobs program, or if there's any jeopardy to the group home aid. So at this point, the school department will have to be concerned with how that governor's budget goes, because they still, when it goes through the General Assembly, they're still gonna have to have a balanced budget. So if they were to lose another $200,000, they would be in need of reducing expenditures or developing other resources that were gonna replace that type of money. You know, I placed that on record because we're not gonna know probably till the first week in June as to where the governor's budget is gonna marry with the General Assembly, or whether there's going to be substantive changes that are going to occur there. So it still is an open discussion. One of the things that hasn't been discussed yet that I think is a dialogue that's necessary is looking at the program. The budget that we have presented as a component of the municipal budget program reflects a school program as presented by the school department. It does not look at any policy changes, reductions in services. It simply says if you're going to run the type of services that you're talking about next year, this is the bottom line amount of money that you need to do that. So if there's things that are new within that budget, those are things that should be discussed as far as what is new in that budget, or what would occur if there was jeopardy to some of the state aid. And I think that's a discussion that could follow at this point.
Further questions here at the table? Jim?
Yeah, before I comment on Steve's comments, Kristen, can you help me out with these? In your budget, do you have these two new positions? I know the newspapers reported $250,000 of potential costs, I think a behavioral specialist, and I just didn't see it in your PowerPoint here, but can you tell me who they are and why they're needed? Or-
We have two new positions. One, if my computer would help me, I could actually find our what to go to next if you asked us the reduction piece. But two new positions, one a behavioral specialist, which would be an exempt employee, and the other would be a STEM coordinator. STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math. There is a lot of changes to the Common Core, which is the, albeit national curriculum. We're morphing from one state test to a new state test. We're morphing from one curriculum that was a state curriculum to more of a national curriculum. Most of the impact is in the area of mathematics. Secondary impact, I would say, is in science. That coordinator would support efforts in that area and would also be of assistance to be able to evaluate staff. The behavioral specialist comes out of really a need at the elementary level, where we have regular education youngsters not identified as having special needs who are in need of behavioral supports that are not being fully supported with the existing staff.
Okay.
Stopped humming now.
All right, thank you. Just a comment on Steve's comments, if I may. Steve brought up the meals tax, the $39, $40 million swap. And I just don't know if you've had the conversation at the school committee level, but that meals tax is a direct attack on a major part of our economy in southern Rhode Island, and particularly South Kingstown. This is not healthy for us. Many of our parents down here and parents of children in schools live with a great 8 or 10 week summer and otherwise, but this is serious. That $39 million is, I think, frankly, quite vulnerable. I don't know if they'll settle at half, but I can only tell you that I'm very worried that the same people you're trying to help in the school system will be harming those who are running small business. I mean, this is not, there are not any easy choices here, not at all. What Steve didn't mention tonight, what I'm very much concerned about, my second of concerns is the automobile excise tax. We're looking at, and I don't know the words correct here, the net trade value versus how they did it before. But in Steve's budget, you'll see just short of $700,000 with a 20% adjustment for the valuation model. That's almost 700,000. School share would be about 550,000, and this is now up at the General Assembly. These are serious dollars that, so in other words, these two items could work against us, or right now where we have them, we're using them, but both could work against us. And I'm very much worried about, when you look at Woonsocket, and you know the cities and towns here, I'm very much worried that the General Assembly is going to have no choice but to accelerate those cities and towns that need a faster funding formula, and also accelerate those that they're taking money from, and put us on a faster course to lose money. I'm very worried about that, and you have to be worried about that. Who's coughing up the money from Woonsocket? Our taxpayers, us, plus your tight budget. I mean, we're the ones paying the penalty in these other areas. So that's a major concern to me. And the other thing is, you have the court challenge on the pension issues. You know darn well, if we were sitting here right now and we had $2.8 million that you would have needed for a pension, I don't know, I just don't know where it would even begin. And so those four items are all things that could work against us, either in whole, part, total. So I would ask you, frankly, to rescind, if you could, for a year, those two specialists that you'd like to hire. That's $250,000. And might as well, here I'm on a roll. I'd also like to have you rescind the preschool move, if that's still going to happen, over to South Road. And my concern for that, I think, as you know, is if that happens, what you've done is block South Road. You know I always wanted to have Curtis Corner close and use all 5 elementary schools. But if that happens, you've now got South Road used for a preschool. And if you look at the numbers for Wakefield School, the 255 kids, Wakefield School, I think, is vulnerable to close here. I don't know if there's any backdoor, any evil activity here or something in mind here, but with 255 kids, you can almost still keep a 90% ratio at Peacedale, West Kingston, and Matunic and move all those kids out of Wakefield School. You only have about 10 kids difference according to the numbers here I'm looking at. I'm very uncomfortable with that because I think Wakefield should be the last school standing in the town of South Kingstown. So, frankly, you would have my support for the rest of the budget, but I would ask you to rescind those based upon, I think, factors that may really come down on us hard. And all we have to do is have one of these change, one of these items, a meals tax in half, the valuation of the automobile excise tax, and we're going to have to find hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'd rather make that effort now than later, and if we have to, I don't want to raid the undesignated fund balance, but it's there for an emergency, and if that's the case, yes. And also, too, going back to the federal government and this federal funds thing, everybody knew that that was really a one-year jobs bill. Everyone knew that we would have to turn that page, look at it again, and this is just falling back into structural deficits again. We're going to have to continue that. And we knew it was really a one-year grant from the federal government. So I think my concerns are quite valid here. I don't think the state of Rhode Island's out of the woods economically. We may get a small revenue boost when the governor's group meets in May, but it's going to be very slight, and we are really on the edge, and I think we've got to be as conservative as possible, and I would hope that you would rescind those items that I've asked you to at least postpone them for 1 year. Thank you.
Maureen?
Well, Jim, certainly appreciate you sharing your feedback on that, but these conversations, policy conversations that the school committee has had and will continue to have as the resources are available to us. But in addition to what we can afford, we look at it through the lens of what our students need.
Carol?
Kristen or Maureen, what kind of education is needed for a behavioral specialist? Is that a advanced degree of some kind beyond a bachelor's?
We talked a lot about different backgrounds, and we centered in on a psychologist, a clinical psychologist background.
Oh, okay, thank you. And as far as the meal tax, I mean, I really don't hear much support at all for the governor's proposed 2% increase as to the meal tax. So I do feel we have to be very concerned about not relying on that, because from everything I hear, I don't think that's going to prevail, that 2% increase. And where is that in the revenue statement? Is that included in the state aid, the extra money, Steve, from that,
No,
from the meal tax?
Meals tax is in the state budget at 2%. The meals tax that affects South Kingstown is in the general fund budget.
It's in the general
Which is not under scrutiny at this point.
So are we relying on it in the first instance, or have you not relied
Now,
on it?
what we're looking at is that if the governor's budget proposed that he was going to get 39.5 million of the $69 million that he was going to need to fund the increase in education, and he doesn't get the 39 million from the meals tax, if the General Assembly is going to approve the expenditure level that the governor's proposed, they're going to have to come up with the funding from another source.
Oh, okay.
There are other sources that they'll be looking at, because once the May Revenue Estimating Conference gets done, they may be looking that they will be able to increase the estimates associated with how much is coming in or projected to come in from income and sales tax, or they'll also be looking at the monies that will come in from the lottery. So those are the three principal sources of revenue that the governor's the state budget is based on. So, yes, there can be adjustments that are made even if they do not agree to the meals tax. And I haven't heard anything that would suggest that that's going to go anywhere.
Right.
But I think that there will be the potential for additional monies coming in from other taxing sources once that revenue estimating conference completes their work. So that's all going to be part of the discussion when they get into May, June period. Right now, Assembly's talking about trying to get out within the first 2 weeks of June. So it would really be waiting for the May estimating conference to complete its work, and then you'll see things move on that budget process. But, you know, one word on the motor vehicle. Yes, the motor vehicle could be changed. However, if the motor vehicle is changed, motor vehicle isn't an independent revenue source in and by itself. It's a component of the town's entire tax levy. If, in fact, the municipal budget is adopted with a tax levy, as would be necessary at this point, if we were going to lose $700,000 in income from the motor vehicle as a source, it would mean that you would be raising $700,000 more out of the real estate base, because you're not changing the level of property tax levy. The property tax levy is still set at $66.4 million. But if you're only going to get $3 million or $2.7 million out of the motor vehicles, you either have two choices. Either you increase the real estate rate, or you reduce your expenditure statement. And I think Jim's point is that when we look at the property tax levy in total, 76.4% of that tax levy goes to school purpose. So I think his suggestion was that if you're going to lose the $700,000, the displacement should be proportionate with 76% of that being school purpose. But again, you would be able to do one of two things. Either reduce your expenditures by that amount, which I think would be impossible to do, or what you would have to do is to see the impact that would be associated with the real estate. And as I pointed out when we talked about this the other night, is that it would mean if we lost $675,000, which was what the 20% would have been, it would have meant that we would have to increase the real estate rate by 16 cents per thousand. So I just want to make sure that everybody's playing with the same information on this. It's not a simple, if the money can't be had through the motor vehicles, that levy disappears, because the levy can't unless the adjustments are made in the expenditure statement as well.
But with the budget that they've presented, we're still looking at the same 0% tax increase.
That's right, and as I said to you before, we've got still things that are gonna happen with the budget. We talked about, what the tax roll is going to be, both for the motor vehicles, which is still being prepared, and what the real estate roll is going to look like. At this point, we're still getting in by March 15th. By tomorrow, we have to get the numbers in from intangible properties. The bad news was that what we were expecting at 17 million came in at about 18.5 as far as loss on the real estate roll for tangibles with American Power. So there's going to be more adjustments that are going to be made, and we're going to have to balance out that budget to keep it at zero.
Right,
But the target number is still at the zero.
great. Thank you.
Any other questions here at the table? I just have a question. We had a presentation here in the Town Council chambers the other night, Healthy Places by Design, and we have a breakfast at URI. And it was mentioned in the beautiful brochure, leaflet, magazine, whatever you want to call it, that they put together about the crossing guards. So could somebody make note of, I know we've cut crossing guards, but we still have back last year, I believe. Was there any cuts in crossing guards, and how are we doing?
Our crossing guards are determined by the police department based on the location of the schools, the traffic flow, and a number of things. So what we get each year from the police department is their recommendation for crossing guards, and then a budget for that. And then our budget then is charged for the actual crossing guards. So if there were any reduction, any slight reduction, it would have been in the police department and what they were recommending we needed. And then, like I said, we pay for the service. We're charged back for the service through the police department.
And the comment in that brochure was from a survey, and the community really is very happy with the crossing guards in the town, so I thought I just wanted to pass that over to the school committee.
And they do a wonderful job. There's a crossing guard outside of Broad Rock, which is a very heavy parent flow area and bus flow area, and she does a wonderful job over there. And she's been complimented by many for that.
The changes, restructure roles in special education, is that basically referring to the behavior specialist, or are there more restructuring in special education?
You're looking at the past.
Right. Well, I know there was mention made last night at the school committee meeting with some changes at the high school with special education, so I didn't know if that, somebody wanted to address that.
I almost can't hear you. This computer is so loud, I don't want to turn it off, because if you ask me what were the areas of budget reduction, I want to be able to get it for you. Would you mind repeating that again?
I think we were hearing that buzz all the way over here, right, Carol? We're like, where is that noise coming from?
It's coming from my computer.
Is that on the 7-year cycle of replacement?
Yes.
The question was, somebody addressed some changes at the high school next year with special education, and I believe it's a lack of self-contained classes, but more inclusionary practices, and I really don't know, I'm just asking. It was mentioned last night at the school committee.
Last night in public comment?
Yes.
I mean, I do know that we are moving towards having more co-teaching classrooms and pulling youngsters out of a self-contained environment into a more mainstreamed environment. But I'm not recalling the exact speaker that you're referring to, other than making that change throughout the district, which has been an ongoing effort. We're doing some absolutely fabulous co-teaching work. Our special educators and our regular educators have invested a lot of their time in professional development, and they're really seeing great reward in that partnership. But to my knowledge, there aren't any other substantive changes that I'm aware of.
Okay, great. Any further questions? Jim?
Yeah, Maureen, I certainly understand your response on those two specialists. I'm sure the children's needs are always a moving target. And, but to put it another way, suppose one of my scenarios comes true, that we, the state and the town lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. Are these two specialists, are there those that are currently employed teachers that you would give up to keep these two specialists if one of my scenarios, worst-case scenarios, would be made?
Yeah. Yep, so that was why I was opening my computer. We talked to you all at the last joint session about our UCOA data, and UCOA data is the Universal Chart of Accounts data. Where we are below spending in terms of statewide averages, the data that shows where we are as a district in terms of above the state average spending. And so if the proposal was a bottom line reduction in the town transfer to the school committee, then the school committee would need to meet and have a conversation about where that would come from. It wouldn't be a direct communication from your table to their table, if that's what I'm hearing. And so they've already had a very thorough discussion about areas that we could look at.
All right, I mean, I'm looking at personnel here. I mean, if these two folks come in, and they'd be new to the kids, so it's not like we're taking something away, but would they be replacing other positions that right now you would target if we lost $500,000 that we
These would be two
giving
new
to the schools?
positions, so they're not replacing current staff. They would be additions needed.
I understand,
Okay,
but
you
if we
got-
come through with a
So
$500,000
if-
loss,
if you
say
made
all of a sudden we have
$500,000
less money for you.
Right. If you had made a $500,000 cut, then at our next school committee meeting, we would review all of the items contained in our budget with a highlight towards where we are spending more than the state average.
Okay, so not necessarily personnel then?
It would
keeping
not
these-
necessarily be personnel, certainly could be a part of our conversation.
Okay. And my other question I forgot to ask you, the NEA did open the contract, is that reopened? And if it's reopened, is it a money issue or management issues? And you certainly don't have to get into anything confidential, but is the contract, was it reopened by the NEA?
There was a request to reopen.
Okay, it was a request to reopen, okay, all right. So you can't tell us if it was money or management issues?
We have not met yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other questions here at the table, I'm going to,
Ella, let me just make sure that I put one more thing on the table, so that if it were to come to fruition, people are aware of it. One of the other concerns that I have, and I think Alan shares, is that the changes that have been made in the pension systems could also have financial implications as far as municipal and school purposes are concerned. And the reason I say that is that when the initial reassessment of assets was done after they had changed the actuarial assumptions, the requirement for local contribution was going to be $221 million from the collective school districts. Once the changes were made to the act as far as the COLAs and the age of retirement and coming up with a hybrid system, the savings were about $84 million from what it would have been if there were no changes made at all. The thing that people need to keep in their mind is that the lawsuits that are advancing, and probably will be filed within the next several weeks, were they to succeed in saying that the actions taken by the General Assembly were illegal, would mean that truly the $221 million would be back on the table, where only $121 million was being appropriated. And that's going forward. And so it would affect not just the state budgets, but it would affect every budget, whether it's the MERS system or whether it's the teacher retirement system. So, you know, a lot of people say, well, they made the choice, it was a hard decision, we're all set with it. We're not set with that until that's gone through the court systems. And if the court systems are in decisions over the first two issues, One dealing with transferring retirees to Medicaid. And secondly, on the second case that was looked at last year, there looks to be a lot more support within the court system for saying that existing benefits can't be amended. So that could come back as a potentially difficult issue, because we're talking about, in the first year alone, $84 million less in payments. And in addition to that $84 million, by setting up a hybrid system, the hybrid system is going to have $16 million statewide from school systems contributions that are going into defined contribution plans. That's an irrevocable trust. So those monies would not be able to be recaptured were the defined benefit plan found to need to be funded in its entirety. So we're looking 12, 18, 24 months to the future. But you know, I think it's my responsibility to make sure that people understand that there are other issues that we've got to be very frugal with the way we address our finances as we go forward. We certainly are in proper financial shape as a municipality, but I think a lot of that is because we're continually looking at where the bumps in the road could be and how we're going to address them if they occur. But I think everybody needs to be on notice that there's potential issues with that retirement adjustments if, in fact, we don't see support within the court system as far as the steps that have been taken. They will be monumental.
Thank you, Steve. Any last-minute questions here at the table before we open the microphone to the public? Okay. If anyone from the public would like to come and comment, I would like to reiterate what I stated at the beginning of the meeting, that this is a budget work session, and if we can keep all comments, questions related to the budget, that would be great. Any questions from the public?
Keith Forehaven. I haven't heard any part of the conversation directed towards the potential savings with moving the preschool to Peacedale versus moving it to South Road. Anybody like to take that one up?
If we were to move the preschool to Peacedale, we would have roughly $68,000 in expenses, and that was targeted toward three basic things: some air conditioning work that would have to be done over there in support of IEPs. A new playground would have to be installed because they couldn't share the existing playground, and we would have to do some plumbing. Most notably toilets in some of the classrooms. Should we go over to South Road, our work would be slightly less costly and would only include some air conditioning work and fencing of the existing playground. We wouldn't be installing any new playground. We may enhance it with some age-appropriate equipment, but the major cost would be simply just fencing it to meet requirements. And then if we were to go over to South Road, our current leasee, should they extend their lease, would be paying for the utilities during essentially during the first year of our existence in the building, and then any other expenses would be simply a reallocation. So. And then the other thing I would mention, if we make the move over to Peacedale, that would be somewhat of a temporary move. And then if we were to move it again, then we would we would be experiencing that 60-some thousand dollars again in the new move, most likely.
I just want to clarify, thank you, John, because I know we both have not been in our office very much today to bring a whole bunch of stuff with us. I want to be clear to the public that the school committee voted to move the preschool to South Road, that that's not an if situation at this point. But I think what Mr. Vorhaben is talking about, in addition to the information about the adjustments that would have to be made to either site out of the budget year that we're in now, not the budget year that we're discussing tonight, there was an option, could we realize nursing savings by relocating from Hazard, where we have a full-time nurse, to Peacedale, where there already is a full-time nurse. Right now at Hazard, because of IEPs, we're supporting more than a full-time nurse. And I think there were preschool educators in the audience at one of our school committee meetings to communicate that to the public, that's not a given, but certainly could be a potential savings if the program were allocated to Peacedale. The other piece that we talked about with the Reconfiguration Advisement Committee is, could we do without the half-time preschool administrator? Certainly, we'd still need to have someone with preschool special education administrative expertise, but could that be like a consultant instead of a part-time employee? And we felt there would be a clerk reduction in terms of, we right now have a full-time clerk at the Hazard School. Could that work be absorbed with the clerks and secretarial staff that is available at Peacedale?
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Other comments? I'm going to jump to Carol for a second here.
Kristen, by moving, and anyone, I guess, by moving to South Road, will you be able to expand the preschool program?
The school committee asked me to meet with all of the neighborhood preschools, and they all graciously came, talked about what that might look like, how they would want to be a part of any expansion discussion. So the school committee is not contemplating expansion at this point. Clearly, you could not expand at Peacedale, but there's different ideas about expansion. Could it be a place where we open up another preschool classroom or two? Could it be a place where other folks could rent space from us to expand their preschool services? There's been discussions about, opening up space to rent maybe to a physician in the area, a dentist in the area. And so we had a brainstorming session about that. Now that the school committee has made their decision, we are forming an early learning team. Dr. Sicardo and Carol Brown will work with our preschool teachers and the representatives from the private preschools in the area to talk about plans moving forward. After the team has their discussions, they would bring that to the school committee level as any sort of a recommendation, but we're not there yet.
And if you were to have the preschool, I know you're not going to have it at Peacedale, but wouldn't that have required redistricting of certain students at Peacedale if you were to put the preschool there?
The original Reconfiguration Advisement Committee plan was to equalize the size of each of the schools. That met with some concern from the
Yeah.
Peacedale parent community that they were concerned about the traffic flow, they were concerned about the parking. The parking and traffic flow has alleviated now that it is a K-4 school, much more significantly than when it was a K-5 school. That would be adding back that extra traffic. So we know we can support it. We had fifth graders there.
Right.
But, it would be an impact on the families at Peacedale, and they came out and spoke to the school committee and talked about how that would impact them.
That sounds good, really.
Kathy?
I just want to state that in regards to the playscape in the playground area at South Road Elementary School, since many of my neighbors in the past were involved in some of the fundraising to make a great playscape area, it's absolutely I think, a very, very nice space that's still used quite a lot and has really held up very, very well, and I think is a big asset to any of the kids that will go back to the school at South Road. So just wanted to comment on that because I know I was involved in some of the fundraising many years ago.
May I comment back to that?
please.
Thank you, Kathy. There was a lot of discussions with the Saravo family, actually, about the Matty Playground and how that would be impacted, and would it be moved to Peacedale? Would it be moved to South Road? And the folks in maintenance felt that the playground might not survive the move, and so we would leave it right now at the high school site for that community to enjoy. If the preschool were to be relocated to Peacedale, we would have to build an entirely new playground. But because the playground at South Road is so gorgeous and handicap accessible, we feel we only have to put in extra features. It has already been approved for very young children. It was a very, very nice design program, so we're appreciative of that work. Thank you.
And may I also comment, since I was on the board, one of the board members for the Matty Saravo Playground, the amount of fundraising that went in, and I'd hate to see that moved, because there's some really, really expensive and very nice pieces of equipment that we chose and placed in there, and I helped dig some holes to make those things fit in there, and I'd hate to see them pulled up and broken, so I'm glad that it is staying there, and I agree with the Saravo Foundation to keep it in place.
Thank you. Going back to comments from the public?
Jonathan Daly LaBelle. I think where a lot of the, my guess is where a lot of the questions are coming from about the South Road is there was a meeting in January between the two boards, and there's been, I mean, years. I mean, the words that always ring in my ears are process, you know, all due deference there, and long-term planning. And so here we are, you know, in the middle of March and really the middle of February with a different plan, when there was a meeting at some point in January, you know, capital improvement program evaluation, which really is all about long-term planning, and it wasn't brought up that this was even being considered. And I thought of what a lot of the you know, years of conversation is, you know, working towards, you know, what could happen with South Road, you know, what would that end up being eventually. And so all of a sudden to have this happen, it's like a total 180. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. I don't know if anybody can end up speaking to that or not, but. So if I can ask Mr. Alford a question, or anybody really, but I don't know if I understood correctly. Do you feel like the 2% increase in the meals and beverage tax, that is not likely to be passed?
I don't think that it will be passed in its present form, no. I'm not sure, Jonathan, whether what you'll see is adjustments or proposed adjustments being made through the governor's office once they see what the Revenue Estimating Conference comes up with for numbers, or the General Assembly taking their own initiative on it. At the 2%, I just don't see that that's possible.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. I don't think that's the way that things should go. I didn't know if that's something that the boards you would want to take a position on or not. But if it's kind of if it's not likely to go anywhere, I can see where you wouldn't want to invest time in that.
I'm not suggesting that that they may not come with a lower percentage, whether it's 0.5% or 1%, or attempt to do something like that. All I'm suggesting to you is that I think that there won't be any decisions made on it until after they see what the Revenue Estimating Conference comes up with for numbers from their major revenue sources.
All right, well, I guess I would advocate to, I don't know, the school committee business as well, but town council, you know, to have that discussion and, you know, bring in community comment and thoughts and come to maybe a consensus, you know, whether this community would be for that increase or not, or against it. You know, and I think the other piece that always, you know, maybe has people puzzled and, you know, trying to make sense of it, and I know a lot of the stuff has to be quiet, executive session type stuff. But, you know, the addition of 2 administrators, reduction of 3 teachers. And so I just had a question, I don't know if there's an answer to this or not, but these 3 teacher positions, are those actual, the people who were let go, are the positions being let go, or those people will be replaced and the positions are maintained?
There's no plan to reduce any positions in the school district unless through sort of class size or attrition. So for example, if at a particular kindergarten, after kindergarten registration happens in March or at the end of April, that we had 4 kindergartens and we'd need 3, or we had 3 kindergartens and we'd need 2, we certainly would make those adjustments based on enrollment. But you're not seeing reductions in our budget.
So there's no, like, that's because those were 3 special ed positions, is that right?
I gave you my response.
I'm
John.
sorry, okay. Well, I'm just, is there any, okay, just so I'm understanding, there's no foreseeable programmatic change or level of service?
As of today, there are no reductions in staffing in the budget unless by, let's say that at the high school, after the course schedule is done, youngsters decide that they're not as interested in a foreign language, one particular foreign language over another, then you could see a change in staffing, a slight change in staffing. That would be due to student choice or student enrollment, but in terms of the budget process that you're in today, the school committee is not recommending, nor am I, a reduction in staffing. Unless, of course, you know, I mean, we had that discussion a little bit earlier with Mr. O'Neill, but at this point, that's not what we're looking at.
Okay, I just heard that from a couple people in the community, that was definitely a concern. And then, you know, as I think of it, you know, this ties in with, you know, there's been years of cuts, and it's been heard, you know, over and over that none of this is good for education.
Then thank you so
yeah,
much for
thank you.
clarifying that then.
Okay. Well, and so with those, you know, years of cuts, I'm not sure that I've seen the evaluation process to say, you know, okay, so it's not, because I'm going to take you at your word that when you're making these cuts and you're saying it's not good for education in South Kingstown, that you mean it, and it's not good for education in South Kingstown. I'm just wondering what the evaluation process is. I haven't really seen it to evaluate whether or not that's true. And I know we talk about test scores, but I'd like to think that the community that I live in, where I'm raising my children, is not just about test scores, and that there's something that goes a little deeper. You know, how do these changes that have occurred, how has it impacted our kids, you know, socially, emotionally, that kind of a thing. And I think I'd like to see more teacher participation, you know, really soliciting teacher input. They're the ones that are in the classrooms, they're the ones that are in the schools, and, you know, I'd like to see the teachers treated more as a partner. And I probably, if there was a poll, it probably would be 100% that teachers do not feel like they're partners in this process. All right. On my agenda that I have, that I printed out, and I guess it's over there, it says number 3, other matters of interest and concern. I do have another matter of interest and concern, and it does, in my opinion, can affect the budget, because if everybody's not performing the way that they're supposed to, and there's not process in place, that certainly can impact budget. And I'm not going to belabor the point, but I was at school committee last night. I was shut down in my comment, and so I certainly feel I would have finished my comment last night, but that right was taken away from me. And the chair told me that we get it, you know, to my comments. We get it, Jonathan, we get it. And I don't think that it is gotten. You know, there's been 17 meetings missed. It's right in the bylaws that it's called for regular meeting attendance. There's no consequence there, and I'm wondering, yeah, please.
I just want to make sure that this does relate to the budget. I did have a conversation earlier with Mr. Alford, and we're going to try to keep all comments. So if it is related to the budget, please continue. Otherwise, you may have to come back to the next town council or school committee meeting.
Okay. Well, so is this other matters of interest and concern will be eliminated from the agenda for future meetings, or?
No, because it's a budget hearing. We're just trying to keep it focused on budget stuff.
Okay. So you are taking that off of tonight's agenda?
No. Other matters of interest and concern is just going to be linked into the budget work session.
Okay.
So this, because it is a budget work session, other matters of interest we're just going to try to, I mean, if there's something that you can bring up that you can link into the budget work session, you know, please continue.
Okay. I believe school committee meetings, you talk about the budget. Okay? Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I go to school committee meetings and I hear the budget talked about. And when people are not, the elected officials are not in attendance at those public meetings, then they're not part of the budget conversation. And so I think that that impacts that person's ability, or any person who's not in attendance at a budget meeting, their ability to perform and serve the public. The people who are on our boards are public servants in budget deliberation, and if they're not serving, then I'm not sure what they're doing. So I hope that this will be looked at, and you know, there's a lot of, the whole problem is that the school committee has set up a process where they're really not allowing the public to participate, because people can come forward and speak, but they're not really a welcome member in the process. And so I hope it will be addressed. This is not just about one person. This had happened with a lot of meetings missed previously. So it now has become a trend, and not only is there no consequence, there actually seems to be a reward. And it all does relate to the budget, because, you know, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the work that you do in this chamber, or certainly a very sizable portion, and most of the work done with the school department, or certainly a sizable portion, relates to the budget. So if elected officials do not attend and are not an active part of the process, which is called for in the bylaws of the school committee, then that is going to affect budget outcomes. Thank you.
Other comments from the public? Any further comments here at the table? Raisa, and then Tony.
We didn't mention, actually, with the South Road vote and the move, we didn't talk about the teachers in that situation, and I think I did want to mention that the teachers, the preschool teachers, were very excited about the prospect of moving to South Road as opposed to Peacedale, and the Peacedale teachers, Andrew's at Peacedale at this point, and I've had many conversations with the Peacedale teachers, and they certainly would have welcomed the preschool there, but did not feel that it was the best situation for the preschoolers. So we were happy to get that feedback, and I think that the teachers would agree that they were heard in that instance, and they were very supportive of the move to South Road as opposed to Peacedale.
I've heard that as well. Tony?
I don't recall ever in mid-April getting a tremendous sigh of relief that the budget process is over. In the 7 years, this being the 8th year that I'm involved. So this, I share everyone's concerns tonight. I think they're very, very legitimate, and it does reflect where we've been in prior years. And I think that when you're faced with the unexpected shortfalls in revenues, then in the past, school committees have had to make those adjustments, and we certainly will need to. Again, we know that there's no redo. We don't go back to the town and adjust the tax transfer, and certainly we understand that the state will make their decisions independent of how they affect us, and so I find this to be in a similar position that I have found ourselves to be in over many years that I have been here. I think there's, as Steve spoke to, the conundrum of the predictability of the pension reform and the viability of any solution. I can recall back that when we talked about the last contract negotiations about how we couldn't be certain about committing to 3 years based on, a lot of that was based on the uncertainty in pension. And so I think those concerns were reflected by the school committee last year, and as a result, there was a unique aspect of our resolution. So I just want to point out that I think we find ourselves in a similar spot, you know, and I don't know if, I don't see it within my bylaws that we would be the governing body that would make suggestions or resolutions about the meals tax. I certainly would have my own opinion on that as a citizen and a family that's been in the food industry, but I don't think it's appropriate for me to be representing that at a school committee table.
Any other comments here at the table? Kathy?
Just while we have the school committee here, I know last night that you were honoring one of the retirees as Cindy Uppeluch from the South Road, speaking of South Road Elementary School. And since both my children had Miss Cindy, I just want to say that I pass it on if I don't see her, that, and also to Christine, to tell her that she's definitely going to be missed, because she was a wonderful, wonderful kindergarten teacher, and my kids truly learned a lot, and we still have the alphabets with the yarn letters that she does, and I've put them away, and, you know, the kids, when they go through their thing, they're, oh, Miss Cindy's alphabet. And she did such a great job with them, and she wore her costumes, and I was in there with her dragon parades and whatever else that she did all those years ago, and just a phenomenal teacher, and I was just sad to see her go. Well, a loss for the school, but I'm sure that the next step in her life that she's very happy about it. So anyways, I just thought I'd say, all right, give my regards. Thank you.
Any other questions here at the table? Okay, I just wanted to mention, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was stated before the meeting started that school committee member Liz Morris is not present today because she's attending a special ed local advisory committee meeting over at Curtis Corner Administration Building. And I'd like to thank Kristen and John and all the school committee and Steve and Alan and our town staff. It is a process that will be continued, and the dialogue will continue, and it's always a pleasure. So any last minute comments before we adjourn? Okay, meeting adjourned at 8:35. Thank you. Congratulations. Patrick and Wynn.